Paul Revere was not just the writer from a famous poem. He was a silversmith, intelligence operative, artillery officer, and founder of North America's first successful copper rolling mill. He was a veteran who helped turn political independence into industrial power. Welcome to the Celebrating America 250 podcast. This series is dedicated to the men and women who wore the uniform and then came home to build, invent, and lead in ways that reshaped our nation. Across these episodes, we honor veteran innovators from every era of American history. Warriors who became entrepreneurs, engineers, organizers, and visionaries, carrying the mindset of service into factories, farms, shipyards, laboratories, and boardrooms. In each story, we will trace a simple arc: where they came from, how they served, the moment they pivoted to civilian life, what they built, and the legacy they left behind for all of us. This is not just about dates and titles. It is about courage under pressure, resilience in transition, and the quiet, determined work of building a stronger country in peacetime. Interesting fact: on the night of April 18, 1775, Paul Revere rode through the dark outside Boston, warning Patriot leaders that British regulars were moving toward Lexington and Concord. But more than a quarter century later, at age 65, that same man risked nearly everything he owned to start a copper rolling mill in Canton, Massachusetts, because he believed the young United States Navy should not depend on British copper to protect its ships. His copper would end up on the hull of the USS Constitution, old Ironsides, and on the dome of the Massachusetts State House, literally covering the nation he once rode to defend. This is how a midnight rider became a manufacturing pioneer. Early life and background. Paul Revere was born in Boston's North End in 1735, the son of Apollos Revere, a French Huguenot silversmith, and Deborah Hitchborn, from an established Boston family. As a young teenager, he apprenticed in his father's shop, learning to shape silver, judge heat, and deal with customers, skills that made him both a meticulous craftsman and a practical businessman. When his father died, Revere shouldered new responsibilities just as Boston's economy and politics grew more volatile. In 1756, he briefly left the bench to serve as a second lieutenant in a provincial artillery regiment during the French and Indian War, gaining first-hand experience with logistics, engineering, and command. Returning home, he took over the family silver shop and spent the next 2 decades building a reputation for quality work and reliability, while also using engraving to create commercial prints and political images that kept him plugged into Boston's public life. By the early 1770s, Revere was more than a silversmith. He was a connector, someone who could move information, ideas, and images through a city on the edge of rebellion. Leadership under pressure angered by British taxation and troop presence, Revere joined the Sons of Liberty, the underground network that organized resistance and later the Boston Tea Party. He used his engraving skills to produce powerful propaganda, including his famous Bloody Massacre in King Street image of the Boston Massacre, which portrayed British soldiers firing into a crowd and helped unify colonial anger. As tension escalated, Revere became a trusted intelligence courier. He rode messages between Patriot leaders, watched British movements, and helped organize warning systems, like the lantern signal in Boston's Old North Church. On the night of April 18, 1775, acting on orders from Dr. Joseph Warren, he rode out to warn John Hancock and Samuel Adams in Lexington and alert local militias that British regulars were marching toward Concord's weapons stores. Thanks to that network, many Minutemen were awake and armed when the first shots of the Revolution rang out. During the war, Revere served as an artillery officer in the Massachusetts militia, overseeing fortifications, ammunition, and personnel, roles that demanded calm under pressure, technical judgment, and the ability to coordinate people and materiel when mistakes could be fatal. Those years taught him how to move information quickly, manage complex operations, and treat logistics as a battlefield in its own right, skills he would carry into his civilian enterprises. The pivot, carrying the mindset into civilian life. When the Revolution ended, Revere faced the classic veteran's question: what now? He could have settled into comfortable silversmithing, but he saw new vulnerabilities. By the 1790s, the young U.S. Navy needed quality copper sheathing to protect ship hulls from rot and marine damage. The only reliable source of rolled copper sheets was Great Britain, the power the United States had just fought to escape. To Revere, this was not just a supply problem. It was a strategic weakness. His wartime mindset returned. If your adversary controls your critical materials, your independence is fragile. So he made a pivot. He decided to apply the same grit, experimentation, and logistical thinking that had carried him through war to a new front, building domestic metalworking industries that could serve both markets and national defense. What he invented, founded, and grew Revere did not jump straight to copper. In 1788, he opened a large iron foundry in Boston's North End, producing items like stovebacks, fireplace tools, and window weights. To scale, he gradually shifted from the old apprenticeship model to wage labor, using standardized molds and repeatable processes, early moves toward factory-style production. By 1792, trading as Paul Revere and Sons, he entered the bell casting business and eventually produced more than 900 bells for churches and public buildings across the young nation. Each bell demanded precision in metal composition and casting, pushing him deeper into practical metallurgy. In 1794, he began casting cannon and other military hardware for federal and state governments, securing defense contracts and sharpening his ability to produce large, complex metal components at scale. All of this set the stage for his boldest move. Around 1800, with the Navy's copper need acute, Revere decided to create North America's first successful copper rolling mill in Canton, Massachusetts. At 65 years old, he invested roughly his entire fortune and secured a substantial government loan and supply of raw copper. He drew on his experience rolling thin silver sheets, taught himself copper metallurgy, and even sent his son to Britain to study closely guarded rolling methods. The Revere Copper Company was operational. It rolled copper sheets for naval hulls and bolts, supplied copper for the USS Constitution and other vessels, and produced the cladding for the dome of the Massachusetts State House and later New York City Hall. Revere did not just invent products, he built systems. He standardized processes, organized workers into wage-paid teams, and treated experimentation as ongoing research and development, decades before those terms existed. In today's language, he ran a mission-driven industrial startup, leveraging government partnerships, technical learning, and disciplined operations to solve a national problem. How it changed lives, industry, and community. Paul Revere's legacy is far larger than one midnight ride. His copper company has, in evolving forms, supplied material for ships, civic buildings, and modern infrastructure for more than 2 centuries, helping anchor America's shift from an agrarian colony to an industrial nation. By pioneering domestic copper rolling, he helped free the U.S. from British material dependence, strengthened the Navy, and supported later wartime production when American factories earned the label Arsenal of Democracy. His path, from silversmith to militia officer, from engraver to industrialist, offers a template for modern veterans. The skills developed in uniform, like logistical thinking, mission focus, and calm under pressure, can become competitive advantages in business and manufacturing. Revere also served his community as a civic leader and public official, seeing economic strength, public health, and national security as intertwined responsibilities rather than separate arenas. In the end, his life connects 2 powerful images: a lone rider in the night, warning that an army is coming, and the steady hammer of a mill that gives a fragile nation the metal it needs to stand on its own.